anytime there's a death. And my mother went and visited with him later. And anyway, he says that it's the first suicide he ever knew, where someone shot themselves twice in the head. And even in church history, I have a copy of one of the earlier histories records it as a suicide. But in my investigation, I decided that it was the railroad that made that decision because to have one of their pastors murdered on their train would reflected poorly on them. And they're the ones that turned it in and everything, so they turned in what they wanted. But I pardon me, it affected my father greatly because he was only 14. And then after that, he didn't have a family life, so to speak, because he went to work in the cow camp for the Hash Knife in the 24 Cattle Company as a cook's helper and a wrangler. And that's the way he grew up, all with grown men, and they were kind of rugged, mean men. The Hash Knife ranch came out of Texas, and they only hired gunmen to protect their cattle. And so it was a marvelous thing for him to make the transition. My grandmother, Molly Butler, Butler's Lodge at Greer, I think felt real bad about him being murdered and everything. And when he was asked to go on a mission, he already had 2 children, and she was expecting a 3rd child. And the 3rd child was born while he was gone and got, let's see, what is the disease? It's like flu, only it's what they always used to get. Yes, it was contagious, so they quarantined her place and everything, so she had to go and bury the child all by herself. Jimmy's mother was, all the time she was alive, was always pardon me, was afraid that she'd lose one of her children. And so it affected her life a lot, and mine. But I wanted all of you to know how much I think of Jimmy. He was a very ideal child. Never lacked for confidence. What grade were you in where they invited you at the elementary school at Cave Creek to come and cook Dutch oven biscuits? School 12 or 13. Of course, he could go do all those things. First time he went to Mount Baldy on the horse, he sat in my lap. And fine, but then we got in a bad hailstorm and everything, so I just buttoned up the slicker, and so he sat inside the slicker so he wouldn't get wet. But after that, he rode his own horse, and he had a good pony, and so it was a marvelous childhood. And I digress a little bit because I wanted you to know about my childhood. It was great. We had a very strong work ethic because when I look back on it now, not even knowing, we were very poor. My parents never dreamed of having a home like this. Our home was upstairs above a little country store. We had a little service station, a wood stove. I remember distinctly my father getting the first indoor bathroom, and the first one in Greer. Had a bathtub in it, and he had to lay a pipe all the way from almost a mile from the spring, so he'd have water in his house, and then he hooked his mother onto it at Butler's Lodge, and then his uncle down to Wiltbanks. And until then, we had just outdoor toilets. And there was mothers there. I had to empty the pot every morning for the little children and everything, so it was not a convenient lifestyle. And I spent almost all of my time outdoors. Some people, especially nowadays, children would think they're abused because in the summertime, I had to get up every morning and take the cows up the canyon, grazing, come back and take the calves over the hill to a different pasture, grazing, so go do the same thing at night. So it was terrible for me. I was forced to ride a horse 2 times a day. And just loved it. Some people came up to me at church today that had gone up to Greer and went up the canyon and found lots of raspberries. Well, when I was a child, when I'd go up to get the cows, well, then I knew where all the springs were. So I harvested all the raspberries. And they were ripe and good, and it's a marvelous thing. And so all the outdoor experience was something that I really enjoyed. And all my experiences with my father were out of doors, packing for other people or working at the ranch. Let's see, how old are you in the 8th grade? 13. Well, at that time, my older brothers all had to go to the war. One to Korea, and one was Air Force, stationed at Luke Air Force Base. And so from that time on, in the summertime, I milked 10 or 12 cows twice a day by hand, took care of the horses and the chores, and the chickens and things like that. But I actually liked it. I never thought. I expected that I was to help. And I'll tell you, it worries me a lot about the young people today because we're so prosperous, you don't have to do it for the family to live. My parents had to have a garden and their meat and everything because it snowed in those days. And if they didn't have it, you couldn't go to the grocery store. So later on, when my dad got that little grocery store and everything, it was about as big as half of this house. And then our kitchen was downstairs and our living quarters were upstairs. And it wasn't very fancy, just a big log building up there. I remember when my 2 brothers decided Mom and Dad ought to have their own room and bought knotty pine lumber and gave them a bedroom upstairs. And when I was 12, I was sent to sleep at night in the boys' room because Mother worked all day in the store and everything else and found it pretty near impossible to take care of that big a family. On washing day, had big tubs and a Maytag washer that all it did was give her a wringer to help dry the clothes out. Washing day, it'd take me 3 or 4 hours just to cut enough wood and carry it so she could do the wash. It was hard work. But I would want my family that on reflection is the best thing that ever happened to me. When I went away to paratroopers, I thought I was on vacation. You know, all that workout and running and exercise and everything, piece of cake. But I need you to know from me how important the church is in your lives. And that if you can manage your life to do the things that's expected of you, then you'll be much happier. Now at Greer, pass these down, please. One, keep them there for you. This is what you call the old tithing house at Greer. It's tore down now. But when I was a boy, then it was still up, and that's where I played a lot. When the plane crashed up on Mount Baldy, well, my father packed the 60 caliber machine guns out, and we gave them to a friend down to Yuma, and he kept one for me, and it used to sit on that upstairs, and I poked it out that window and had it on boxes so I could shoot the Japs out that window with my machine gun, because that was the war and my brother was been killed and everything. So I was very unkind in my thinking towards Japanese people. And but anyway, this is facing east, and so in the southwest corner of that, every summer there was a bluebird nest. Now bluebirds migrate, so they'd come back there every summer, and I watched them, and it was a very important part of my life. And so I have this little story, a bluebird story, and it goes like this. A wealthy man and a wise man, and a young man who felt he was wise. And the young man caught a bluebird, and he put it behind his back, and then asked the wise man, "What do I have?" Well, the wise man guessed a bird. Yeah, a bluebird, okay. And the next question from the young man to the wise man was, "Is it dead or alive?" Now the wise man maybe anticipated, but the young man figured if the wise man says it's dead, he'd turn the bird loose. But if the wise man says it's alive, he was just going to crush it to death in his hand. Now, the wise man answered, "It's in your hands." Now, all of you have marvelous opportunities nowadays in your life. And what you do with it is in your hands. Your parents have given you a home and training and opportunities. You can't blame them. You have to take care of it yourself and what you make of your life. I didn't accomplish everything that I thought I would. Never anticipated the problems that I had. Store burned down, lost my farm, those things. And they become very tragic if you let it and pull you down. So sometimes you're going to be broke and you'll need help. But the other thing I want you to know is that your family will be the only ones you can depend on. Friends are neat, but if you really get in trouble, friends won't be there. So take care of your family. You have any questions or anything I said?
What about the wealthy man?
What?
What about the wealthy man? Did you mean you just meant wise man?
Wise man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a
So
wise man and a wealthy man. I referred to him as wealthy, yeah. Just two men.
No.
A wise man who was very wealthy and a young man who thought he was wise.
Oh.
All right. That's good, George. Thank you. The old tithing office was built he was the Bishop of Greer, and he was my great-grandfather, Molly Butler's father, Wilt Bank. And that's a big thing, those few members of the church up there to build that building. And we ended up with it. We tore it down and everything because the church didn't want it anymore. My mother and father bought the property since it joined us. And I've taken all of you up there. You went with me, George, didn't you? So you'd understand how easy it is for you today by comparison to what it was 60 years ago. I'm just about 80 now, and had some problems, and so not very apt to be able to even be here with you when Jacob comes home. And so I wanted this opportunity, and I appreciate you listening. Hope you learned something from it.
Where did your mom, where was she born and raised?
She was born at what you call Hunt, Arizona. That's where we had our farm. That's the old Greer Ranch. It's still there today. The Isaacsons own it now. It was the only good water between St. John's and Holbrook. And so all of the church leaders over the years always stayed there with them when they went back and forth. And she was the youngest of 14 children, all of which lived to get married. And they all worked hard. Her brothers, I don't think really appreciate it. She's the only one in her family that really did what she's supposed to in the church. I'll tell you one other thing. Young women here will be mothers soon, and Shannon's experienced it, but I didn't know why I ended up on a mission. Because no one said, Jimmy, you're going to be a missionary. Okay. And they didn't have the plan then like they have now. And at Greer, you know, it was 15 miles on a dirt road, 30 miles round trip to come down here to go to church. So we had a little Sunday school in the schoolhouse up to Greer in the summertime. But after I became a missionary, then I found that it was a marvelous blessing for me, because it motivated me in the spiritual side of my life and not just in the physical. Quite a difference between the paratroopers and the missionary. When I was paratroopers, they issued you a beer ration every day. That's part of being a paratrooper. You're supposed to be a drunk. You know, and it's just what they expected of you.
Only one crazy enough to jump out of a plane.
What?
Drunk enough to be crazy enough to jump out of a plane.
No. Well, it's training that makes that possible. It's mental conditioning. And, but it became very significant to me that I was there when I hadn't expected to be there. And so for you young women, I inquired in prayer how I ended up to be there. You know, I didn't have the problems my father had by alcohol and everything else when he was away from home as a child. And I would tell you that as clear as I'm talking to you now, a voice said to me, because of the faith and prayers of your mother. And so women, and faithful, prayerful women and mothers control more of the destiny of the world than anything else. And we had family prayers, but my mother's the one that had the faith in the family. And my wife, Jimmy's mother, always said that she didn't worry about me while I was traveling all over the West, trying to make money and these kind of things, because she knew my mother always prayed for me. She was just one of those kind of people that had that kind of faith. So take good care of your mothers, boys and girls and young women. All right, Shannon? Okay.
Amen, brother.
Oh, I could tell you lots of other stories too. But anyway, I had an interesting life, and I think it's about over, near as I can tell. I hope it isn't, but I think it is. And, pardon?
Jacob votes no.
No.
I think we need to take family vote on this type of decision.
Do what?
I think we need to take a family vote on this type of a decision.
Oh, I see. I think you can influence it. Well, the women probably could, but I don't know how much faith you have. But you're being obedient, and I appreciate that. It's a remarkably great family. Jimmy and Shannon, I think, just done marvelous with it. Hasn't always been easy, but everything in their lifetime, based on my observation, has been easier than it was for Loretta and myself. Even though we lived in little apartments and things like that, our first place was a remodeled pump house. And farm south of Chandler. Walls all shaped in like that. And her father added a walk-in closet on it so she'd have some place to put her clothes. I didn't plan very well before I got married. It's kind of impulsive. But anyway, you know, well, heck.
You guys are the ones to be talking.
I had a place to live when I got married.
Yeah.
And I didn't have my papers in and changed my mind either.
Well, you're like rural scientist laugh here. You like start putting your hands together.
Joseph, I'm sure it was very clever, but I couldn't understand what you said.
He was making fun of me, it's all right.
Oh,
Both of them laughed because they knew I was impulsive when they got married too.
no.
I was talking about you.
No, it's not about you two. You met in July and got married in December. We took longer than that, so.
That's engagement's
Jimmy's really tricked me, Jimmy and Shannon, when they got real serious, because I didn't even know about it. Retta probably did, but I was just involved in everything else. And they came to that house there in St. John's, and Shannon sent her sister in. They looked so much alike. I can't remember what was said, but it sure was confusing for me to see them both together for the first time.
I walked in with Shannon's sister Kim. Then Kim went back out, Shannon came back in. It's really funny to
Didn't you
watch
have something else on?
watch Willetta and Mom. She changed clothes?
Was Willetta there?
Yeah, she was there.
Oh,
That was
my.
part of the reason I did it.
Well, I'm relieved to know that you weren't trying to just trick me.
It was Shannon's idea.
Hey, so it skips a generation, so whichever one of us has twins, we're gonna mess it up with you.
Remember, our kids are younger than yours.
That's right. I'll get to spoil them all I want.
Alright.
Well, I don't know where the twins came in Benjamin's family, because neither side of the family have any twins.
I'll sit up here.